On December 10, 1945, Wilhelm Vagner approached the gallows with a notable smirk. He exhibited no fear, nor did he shrink away. In fact, his demeanor suggested a kind of amusement, as if he were attending a performance rather than his own death. For the victims of his cruelties, however, there was zero humor in his final moments. They remembered him as a sadistic figure in the Nazi uniform, and they were finally about to see justice delivered. Vagner was a member of the SS Totenkopfverbände, the notorious Death's Head unit, responsible for managing Nazi concentration camps. His assignment was at Dachau, one of the earliest and most infamous camps in the Third Reich's vast system of murder. Vagner began his tenure as a simple camp guard, but was later promoted to supervise the daily operations within specific prisoner blocks. His violent role was widely known. Numerous survivors later testified that Vagner enjoyed inflicting pain. He would brutally strike inmates for mere entertainment, organize humiliating spectacles, and was particularly notorious for jeering at those being marched to punishment. "He laughed while we wept," recalled one survivor, "and he made jokes as people perished." Other witnesses recounted how he referred to the emaciated prisoners as mere skeletal performers, and forced them to perform dances in exchange for meager rations. After U.S. forces liberated the camp in April 1945, investigators quickly discovered Wagner's identity in the recovered SS personnel documents. He was apprehended within weeks, having attempted to disappear among the retreating German soldiers. Initially, he claimed to be a simple, low-ranking administrative clerk. However, survivors from Dachau swiftly identified him not based on his rank, but by his unmistakable behavior. He grinned when he saw us. They recounted, "We could never erase the memory of that smile." During the Dachau trials, Wagner stood out not because of his predictable and feeble defense, but due to his unyielding arrogance. He displayed absolutely no regret and repeatedly interrupted the proceedings with outbursts of laughter. When evidence, specifically photographs of abused prisoners, was presented to the court, he reportedly wore a smirk. One American military official later labeled him the most overtly defiant defendant they encountered throughout the entire trial. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, including signed records of forced labor assignments, punishment mandates, and extensive first-person accounts of physical torment. Wagner was implicated in the deaths of a minimum of 60 prisoners, either directly through severe beatings or indirectly by deliberate denial of medical care. He did not kill with a weapon. The prosecutor asserted he killed through calculated procedure. When the guilty verdict was announced, Wagner stood erect and gave a simple nod. He refused to submit an appeal for his sentence. In fact, he demanded that his execution be carried out immediately, stating he held zero regrets. "I discharged my responsibility," he declared, "and I performed it admirably." The courtroom was left in a state of shock, less by his statement itself and more by the utter nonchalance with which he delivered it. On the morning of his execution, Wagner showed zero evidence of anxiety. He stood tall, his hands steady his face, devoid of expression. But as the noose was fastened around his neck, he calmly and intentionally offered a smile. It was not simple courage. It was a profound act of defiance, a final assertion of control by a man who had spent years inflicting suffering on the powerless witnesses. Later described it as an exceptionally cold and disturbing moment. His weight dropped, the rope went taut, and the smirk was extinguished. Just like that, one of Dachau's most notorious faces faded into final silence. There were no parting words and no trace of apology.